Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Marty Roth, the president here at UC. I want to welcome you to this special event. We're delighted to have the Secretary of State, Mac Warner, here to talk with us about election security. I can't open up the newspaper or turn on a TV station or get onto the internet these days without hearing something about the presidential and other elections. So I think it's a very, very timely topic and one that has great importance for excuse me, the integrity of ensuring that the folks that we elect are the folks that we intend to and want to have in office, and really speaks to a lot of the convergence which is happening today with the intersection of technology and social media and how it's impacting different elements of society. So we're delighted to have the Secretary of State here. I know it's going to be a compelling presentation. This came together through a meeting that the Secretary and I were attending, and he expressed an interest in coming to campus and said, can you put me in touch with some of your student organizations so we can find a time for me to come to campus, and I was delighted to do so. And Darren Ray, one of our great students, is the president of the Young Republicans organization. So Darren was happy to take the lead and work with the Secretary's office in getting this event organized. So I'd like to ask Darren to come up and introduce the Secretary this evening. Darren? Okay. Thanks.
Hello. Born and raised in the Kanawha Valley, West Virginia Secretary of State Mac Warner is a graduate of George Washington High School and the United States Military Academy at West Point. He is also a graduate of WVU School of Law and holds a master's degree in international law from the University of Virginia. He spent 23 years in the United States Army, retiring at the rank of lieutenant colonel. Prior to becoming West Virginia's 30th Secretary of State in January of 2017, he spent 5 years in Afghanistan with the U.S. State Department. While in Afghanistan, Secretary Warner led the world's largest rule of law program. With more than 1,000 Afghan lawyers, translators, administrative personnel, Secretary Warner and his team were instrumental in the establishment of the Afghan Supreme Court, the country's Attorney General Office, Ministry of Justice, and Ministry of Women's Affairs. Secretary Warner also helped to ensure Afghan women the right to vote, giving Afghan women a voice in their government. After taking office as Secretary in 2017, Secretary Warner went to work making sure that West Virginians were registered to vote. In just 36 months working with the state's 55 county clerks, Secretary Warner has overseen the registration of more than 153,000 new West Virginia voters. He is most proud of the fact that more than 44,000 of those new voters were high school students who are eligible to vote in their first presidential election here coming up in May 12th. Secretary Warner is recognized throughout the nation as a leader in election cybersecurity. He was selected to serve as co-chairman of the Elections Committee for the National Association of Secretaries of State. He has been a frequent speaker at election conferences and college campuses throughout the country and is a founding member of the Defending Digital Democracy think tank at Harvard University. Having been a fighter to ensure women a voice in their government in Afghanistan, Secretary Warner now leads West Virginia's statewide effort to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which guarantees women in America the right to vote. West Virginia is leading the nation in celebrating this commemoration, and in doing so is celebrating the important role that women are playing in our state, local, and national governments. Secretary Warner and his wife, Debbie, have been married for 37 years. They have 2 sons and 2 daughters, all of whom have served or are serving in the United States military. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Secretary of State, Mac Warner.
Thank you.
3 years ago, almost to the day, I went to Washington, D.C. and attended my first National Association of Secretaries of State's meeting, and immediately found myself immersed in a vicious political battle. Now, it's not the type battle that you might have thought between Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, left and right. This was a battle between the states and our federal government. What had happened just prior to my taking office was that Jay Johnson, the Director of Homeland Security under the Obama administration, had named elections critical infrastructure. Well, the Republicans didn't trust the Obama administration. And by the time we met in D.C., the Trump administration had taken over, and the Democrats didn't trust the Trump administration. So collectively, we as the Secretaries of States from the 50 assorted states took up a resolution, and we voted to not accept the designation of critical infrastructure in the elections. We didn't want the federal government messing with our states' rights and our ability to run the elections the way we thought that they should. Well, none of us could get Jay Johnson to describe why he named them to begin with, and we couldn't get John Kelly, Trump's Director of Homeland Security, to talk with us either. So for 2.5 years, I led a battle to figure out why the federal government felt it was essential to name elections critical infrastructure. That involved getting a National Guard asset with the top secret security clearance and cybersecurity to work in the basement of the West Virginia Capitol to do nothing but watch the elections of West Virginia to make sure that they were secure and not being hacked. It also involved getting all the Secretaries of States a secret level security clearance, and perhaps we will even get top secret security level clearance so we can talk to our own federal government. This presentation you're about to see this evening will explain to you why, when we met just 3 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., for our third year of these meetings, why we have all agreed that elections do need to be named critical infrastructure. And in fact, that's why I went to work on the Government Coordinating Council as one of the 5 Secretaries of States on that initial meeting to start implementing the protocols as to just what does critical infrastructure mean in the elections arena. Here's Jay Johnson, and that 2.5 years ended with me sitting down to lunch with Jay Johnson for 45 minutes using my best prosecutorial skills, my defense counsel cross-examination techniques, to find out, get under his brain, under his skin, to find out why he named elections critical infrastructure. And here's the conclusion. There was no secret agenda. There was nothing to be afraid of. He simply knew that the Russians were attacking us using social media, and they were trying to hack into our elections. And he felt the best thing he could do as he was walking out the door was to name elections critical infrastructure, which would give elections a special status with regards to training at the national level, cybersecurity input, and that was verified by John Kelly under the Trump administration. And so there was no hidden agenda. Here are the components that we'll be talking about: deceptive actors, deceptive delivery, and deceptive content. So in the military context, you heard that I've got a military background. So the deceptive actors are the command and control. These are the people across the globe who are deciding, making that decision, we're going to attack U.S.'s elections infrastructure. The delivery is, how do you put rounds on target? Is it an airplane? Is it a naval bombardment? Is it field artillery? So that's the delivery system. So in the social media arena, that's Facebook, Twitter, Google, those sorts of things. And then the content is, what kind of ammo are we firing? Is it a cruise missile? Is it an artillery round? And so forth. Well, is it a boycott of Nike? Is it say the NBA, Black Lives Matter? Is it those type situations that we're going to use to try to tear America apart? The actors, it's not just foreign actors, it's also homegrown folks. So it's foreign and domestic. And I'm going to focus on Russia. That's why it's in red, because that's the main actor in this arena. Just a quick refresher, the ideologies: communism versus our freedoms, liberalism, capitalism, and democracy. We tend to think of the political spectrum on a linear left to right type thing. On the far left, you would have, say, a communist China and so forth. On the far right, a totalitarian regime, say, in North Korea. But in reality, this is what that political spectrum looks like. It's more of a horseshoe shape. The further you get on the left and the further you get on the right, the more they're closer together. So in the political arena, think of a Bernie Sanders on one side and Donald Trump on the other. But the reason that they fight so vehemently is that only one can be in charge. There's either going to be a President Trump or a President, either Sanders, Warren, whomever on the other side. But it's going to be pretty far apart, but only one can be in charge. And so the Russians understand that. So they want to push us, the people on the right further to the right, people on the left further to the left, knowing that we will fight with us if they push us far enough. Here's the Russian strategy: is active subversion. They're trying to get inside our education systems, penetrate political parties, distrust government, and so on. Now, All these slides will be available on our website, so I'm going to throw a lot of content at you this evening, and I'm not expecting you to follow it on all these slides, but you can go to it if you have an interest and go back at a later time. But they want us to kill ourselves from within. We have been focused on one-dimensional checkers, and that is a hackathon in Las Vegas, saying that they might hack a particular machine. Folks, that's not what the Russians are up to. Not one vote has been changed anywhere in America, not one. So they're not trying to hack a phone or a voting machine anywhere in America. Well, they might try, but they haven't been successful at it. Their biggest concern is that the Russians are going to take credit for anything that goes wrong, whether they did it or not. And that by doing so, they will diminish voters' confidence in our election process. What the Russians are up to is three-dimensional chess. Okay, the first dimension is they're going to attack a particular candidate or a particular campaign, say Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. The mid-range objective is to polarize politics and to get us to not trust our government. The long term is to get us to fight with one another, degrade NATO, destroy America and its allies at the national and international level. The means that they're doing this now is through information operations. The scale is new. The propaganda war has been going on for 100 years. We've been at that with the Russians. There have been 3 Cold Wars. We're in the middle of the third one right now. So it's the tactics and it's the artificial intelligence, it's the digitization and the use of the internet that they are doing, and it's the micro-targeting and data harvesting that is making this so volatile at this point in time. The information warfare includes these: the manipulation of information so that it is trusted by a victim without that victim's awareness, so the victim makes decisions against their own best interest and so forth. All right? The most successful thing they did there at the bottom was a fake persona named Jenna Abrams. If you ever got something from Jenna Abrams, that was made up. It was a Russian persona, all right? And they're at it again this election cycle. People believe what they hear first, what they hear the most, what they hear from a trusted source, and when there's no challenge. That means if you don't rebut it, then they're going to tend to believe it more and more. So in this space, you can't have the right to be silent, okay? You've got to be responding to the false information. So I want to emphasize this again. First, most trusted, and no challenge. What we're doing is we're finding more and more people spending more time in this digital world than in the physical world. So let's look how that plays out. This phone right here is reshaping the world that we all live in, all right? It gives you the world that you want to see, and the Russians understand that, okay? It's clickbait populism. We used to, when we get the newspaper, we might read about 10 stories a day. Today, in the digital age, you're getting 110 stories thrown at you on an average a day. That's the magnification of it, so that leads into the most, okay? Whoops, I'm sorry, I just did something I shouldn't have done. Okay? All right? And an illicit bias. It's from my tribe. You're getting stuff that you want to hear. You've made friends with those people, and they're sending you information, so it becomes an echo chamber. You're hearing your own ideas back and forth. So you think it's coming from a trusted source. And then it protects the status quo. No one is challenging that when you're in your own echo chamber, all right? And anybody nowadays can become an expert. Anybody who has a feed to any of the social media becomes an expert. Let's watch how this plays out with data harvesting.
Kogan offered us apps on Facebook that were given special permission to harvest data not from just the person who used the app or joined the app, but also it would then go into their entire friend network and pull out all of the friends' data as well. If you were a friend of somebody who used the app, you would have no idea that I've just pulled all of your data. We took things like status updates, likes, in some cases private messages. We wouldn't just be targeting you as a voter, we'd be targeting you as a personality. We would only need to touch a couple 100,000 people to build a psychological profile of each voter in all of the United States.
So if you've ever gotten something and you think that someone is targeting you, well, they've very probably built a psychological profile on you and know exactly what your likes, dislikes, where you shop, where you bank, and so forth. So that's what's going on with this data harvesting. Now you turn that into micro-targeting. They look at your age, sex, religion, education, and so forth, and you can allow somebody to send one message to an older man in Arkansas who likes to hunt and fish, and a different message to a woman in California who might have completely different perspectives. And the problem with this is that when politicians say different things to different audiences, there's an inability to hold them accountable, all right? There's a real-world example in Texas where they did a poll of suburban women. They didn't like the cameras at stoplights, and so a politician ran on the idea of getting rid of the cameras at stoplights, and sure enough, when he got elected, signed a bill to get rid of them and so forth. That's the kind of micro-targeting that they're doing in today's world. Target predicts pregnancies. How do they do it? Everybody who shops at Target is assigned a shopping number, and they will watch. And when your shopping habits deviate from what you've done in the past, say a woman goes in and she buys a cream that she hasn't bought before. She buys a bag, a purse that now doubles large enough as a diaper bag. That sort of thing, they can predict that, and she buys a blue rug. They know that she's likely to have a baby boy in the next so many months and so forth. They start sending her coupons. And to disguise it, they might put that coupon next to somebody selling a lawnmower and so forth. This actually happened. A man saw what his 23-year-old daughter was receiving in the mail. He thought that Target was trying to encourage her to have sex outside of marriage. So he went and confronted the manager, and the manager apologized profusely. A week later, the father came back and apologized profusely because his daughter was, in fact, pregnant. That is the sort of micro-targeting that is going on now, not just from Russians, but people here inside the United States, marketers, and so forth. How do they get your information? If they're not doing the psychological profiles, you own it. You give it to them yourself. You get a survey. It says, take this, should Soleimani have been killed? Do you agree with the impeachment or whatever? So you take that survey and you start providing information to them. You're just voluntarily giving up your personal information. Or it could be something as simple as register to vote. Now, again, you're turning over your information to a third party. That's why I highly encourage people to go to trusted sources, which is your county clerk and your Secretary of State's office. When you start going through third parties, they're collecting it for perhaps nefarious reasons.
Real game changer was they started using information warfare in elections.
There's a lot of overlap because it's all the same methodology.
All of the campaigns which Cambridge Analytica, SCL did for the developing world, it was all about practicing some new technology or trick. How to persuade people, how to suppress turnout or how to increase turnout. And then it's like, okay, now I've got the hang of it, let's use it in Britain and America.
You saw all those places it's being used all over the world. They're perfecting those techniques and then bringing it to work on elections here in America. The way they're doing it, you know it through the social media. Here, I'm giving you three real-world examples. First is Stacey Abrams in Georgia, 2018. They simply photoshopped something as simple, anybody could do it, any high school student could do it. They put the word communist and Muslim Brotherhood on her sign to turn a pro-Stacey Abrams ad into a negative Stacey Abrams ad. If the first time you ever heard of Stacey Abrams, you saw the sign on the right, you may not be as favorably inclined towards her or to vote for her as you would if you'd just seen this slide. This is real world. Russians did this in that election. Here it is in 2016. The election was November 8th. They did this on November 12th, 4 days after the election. So they're not trying to change your vote on that election. They're not trying to change the outcome of the election. They're trying to change your perception as to whether Trump was legitimately elected or not and whether we should accept him. So they had a pro-Trump rally here, an anti-Trump rally here on the streets of New York City, same time, same place, to try to get the people to fight with one another so you would have another Charlottesville type situation called mainstream media to cover it, hoping we would fight with each other so that they could post to the world that Americans didn't trust the results of the election. Remember when I said they're not trying to hack a particular machine or a particular vote? They're trying to move an entire demographic either to the polls or away from the polls. The main object of their aggression in the 2016 election was the African American vote here in America. So right here, text your vote for Hillary. If you texted that number, your vote for Hillary, that vote went nowhere. It didn't count. all right? Here, it's just, I won't vote, will you? It's telling people just to check out of the net, okay? Just don't participate, all geared towards the African-American community. And here is don't vote for the oppressor, both Trump and Hillary. So not picking one side or the other, they're just saying don't trust either one of them. That's where they were going. Why would you try to hack one machine and change one vote when you can get hundreds of thousands of people to not vote by sending out messages like this? Those were real-world examples. They also weaponized Instagram in particular. You can see the largest thing here was Blackstagram, okay? An awful lot of stuff here, Sincerely Black, Afro Kingdom, and so forth. Here's the percentages of Instagram that was used as weaponized to go against our elections and so forth. Here are just other examples, real world, of what the Russians did here in the United States. This was the top anti-Clinton post dealing with immigration. It's great reading if you have a chance to go back to this slide and look at it. Again, this is the sources of all this are the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, all those 300 agencies are providing this information to us. And then just don't trust the elections, voter fraud. Now I'm going to take a twist. When I heard about this from the FBI, I was a little bit bamboozled. Like, what is going on? Why are you talking to me about the Olympics when I want to hear about the elections? I'm going to make that connection for you, okay? Goes back 40, 50 years, okay? Russia invades Afghanistan. We boycott their Olympics. They retaliate by boycotting our Olympics. It goes on with drugging and the Olympics and us calling each other out and so forth. So we get to the 2014 Sochi Olympics in Russia. What happens, they had a mouse hole in the wall where the urine was kept, where they had tested the athletes, and at night they'd pull that brick out, slide good urine in, pull the bad urine out. It would thaw overnight, be tested the next day, and the Russians would pass. That's how the Russians were doing it. We caught them at it, and it embarrassed them. So they hacked the Olympics system. We hacked the international team. We hacked the anti-doping agency. The U.S. team has disgraced itself by tainted victories. We will disclose others, sensational proof, and so forth. What they did is they hacked into our medical records, and they got to Serena and Venus Williams' medical records. They were taking antihistamines for coughs and that sort of thing, all prescribed by the doctors, all allowed by the Olympics Committee. They got into Simone Biles, who has ADHD, and she had the medications, again, approved by the Olympics Committee. But the Russians, once they hacked into that, knew it, then they got out in front of the story and said the U.S. was doping and made the moral equivalent to their performance-enhancing doping. Here is the direct tie between the Olympics and our elections. 3 of the people that were wanted, identified as doing the hacking, these guys in the red right here, also show up and are wanted by the FBI in the United States for hacking our U.S. election system. Okay, so again, back there perfecting it, using other methods, say in the Olympics across the globe, and then bringing it to work on our elections. That one was kind of one that was eye-opening to me. All right? But they're doing it elsewhere, Estonia, Ukraine, Brazil, and so forth. I'm going to talk about this last one here at The Hague because it's illustrative. Here is an actual Russian team going into the Netherlands to hack the Hague. Now, why would they want to be hacking the Hague? Well, if you remember, there was a London incident where they put chemical powder on a door handle to try to kill a Russian dissident or whatever. Got him very sick and his daughter very sick. Actually killed another woman when they disposed of the powder. She picked it up in a trash can or whatever. It actually killed her. So it was a murder case. So they were investigating the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, was meeting at The Hague. So they set up a mobile team to go in and park the car between the Marriott where they were staying and The Hague, and they started doing the wiretapping or the eavesdropping, if you would. So people thinking that they were connecting to the internet were actually going through the back seat of this rented car, and they were busted in the process. What they do is they pick a divisive issue, LGBT, race, religion, doping, whatever it is. They build social media followings, plant fake news, boost the information, create a controversy, get the press to cover it, and so forth. All right? They will take advantage of any situation that arises. Here's just a list of some of them that they've participated in: Jeffrey Epstein, Parkland shooting, Charlottesville, Soleimani attack, and so on. They're doing it now with the coronavirus. All right? Use the same technology or the same methodology every time. They used to, in the Vietnam era, have to come in and go to the college campuses and physically set up organizations to try to protest and so forth. They don't have to do that in today's world. All they do is get on social media. Here's what they did with the AIDS virus back in the 1980s. They said the U.S. CIA created the AIDS virus to mess with the world. They put it out in 6 different languages in all these different social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and so on. Then they targeted the world with the 6 languages, put it out in 4 corners of the world, and then started reporting on their own false information. And that is a false information that is still going around the world today, mainly in Africa, thinking the U.S. CIA created the AIDS virus. Literally today, they are doing the same thing with the coronavirus, saying that the U.S. did it as a way of economic warfare against China, all right? And you know what Trump has been doing with the Chinese embargoes and so forth. So they've posted it in all these different languages, this fake news, and then they're pushing it out on TV websites and false media. And it's not going away. They've done it every day for the last month. You can expect for them to continue to do so. Is the GRU coming to West Virginia? Well, they know that the NSA cannot wiretap inside the United States or eavesdrop inside the United States. We are doing that across the globe, so they are actually moving these mobile teams to states inside the United States to reduce the amount of ability for our 300 agencies to wiretap them. Their whole idea is to delay, disrupt, discredit, and so forth. And it's not to get you necessarily to believe something in particular. It's to get you to believe nothing. Didn't we all get tired of, say, the impeachment ceremony stuff? It just droned on and on and on. You hear it so much, you finally just tune out so you can get on with your life. That's what they expect to do with all these different arenas that we're talking about. The idea is chaos. That's what they want to create. It's not just Russia. It's these other players. I'm going to talk just for a minute about Soleimani in the Iran situation. Our family personally knows the Fritz family. Jake Fritz graduated from West Point in 2005. In 2007, he was assigned to Karbala, Iraq, to train the military police, just as I was training people over in Afghanistan. Soleimani was identified in a neighboring town. We went to capture him. He got word of it. He got mad that we were trying to capture him and actually abide by the rule of law and take him to The Hague for trial for war crimes. So he struck back. He had his 12 of his Quds force dress up in U.S. uniforms, U.S. vehicles, go inside the vehicle that Jake Fritz was at. They killed one officer as soon as they entered the premise. They captured 4 people, including Jake Fritz, handcuffed him together, handcuffed him to the vehicle, and took off for Iran. When he heard their helicopters overhead, knowing that the U.S. was onto him, they started cutting on Jake Fritz. They literally killed him with a death by 1,000 cuts. They abandoned the vehicle and took off running. Jake, before he died, the last thing that he did was he wrote his Social Security number in his own blood on the windshield of the vehicle, just in case they came back and desecrated the body, his mother would know where he met his fate. So if you have any concern whatsoever about whether we properly disposed of this man, I can tell you with firsthand knowledge of one of the 608 American soldiers he's killed that he deserved what was coming to him. Now, there's an election connection, believe it or not, to this. Top down, remember I talked about the federal government. They wouldn't talk to us. Well, Soleimani was killed on Thursday, January 2nd. On Friday, January 3rd, we had a call at 5:30 in the afternoon where they had all the secretaries of state, all the elections officials across the United States to brief us on being aware that Iran, if they had planted a worm or a bug inside your system and they were waiting for the election to come up, this might be the type catalyst that would cause them to now activate that bug and start sucking away information. This is what they did in the Illinois situation back in 2016, where they took out thousands of names off the voter registration list. That enabled us now to put my cybersecurity people on top of this situation to watch for it over the weekend to make sure that we were not attacked. You can see how the situation changed, where I spent 2.5 years trying to get the federal government to talk to us. Now, in today's world, the federal government is talking to us within 24 hours, notifying us as to what's going on. That's the connection to Soleimani, all right? It's working. We're ready for the 2020 election, regardless of what you hear from mainstream media. And I'm just one of 50 secretaries of states. All of us are doing the same thing. We are prepared for this 2020 election. Now, we can't say that it's 100% secure. It never is. But it's 100% resilient. We're knowing it. We're tuning into it, and if they do attack us, we're going to get on top of it and get it straightened out. And if you don't think that they're coming after you, they went after a California dentist, an Oklahoma steel company, and the University of Maryland, Baltimore. So folks, nobody's immune from the hacking of the Russians. There's also bottom up. About the same time as the Soleimani situation, the information technology guy in Ohio notified us that he was seeing some irregular traffic. We then contacted Ohio, and sure enough, we sent out word to DHS that this was happening in 3 different states. The rest of the states ought to be aware of it. They put out an alert to all the 50 states to watch for a particular type, an IP address where these attacks were coming from. So it's working top down, it's working bottom up. The communication with our federal government is working. Here's the Senate Intelligence Report. The long and short of this, I'll go through a couple of these slides, is that they found, this is the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate did find that the Russians were trying to help Trump. They were trying to denigrate Clinton, okay? So that's the result of this finding. It's more than election targeting. It's to sow discord throughout the U.S. in areas other than the elections. And it's not just online and cyber. They were co-opting unwitting Americans to do these type rallies that I talked about earlier. It even picked up after 2016. It's not just a one-time thing, it's ongoing. And it's not just the paid ads. Free content was used far more. They had $1.25 million per month operational cost simply to push stuff out on social media. We had a dissident who talked to us and said that here was their goal, was to set Americans against their own government. They hired activists, to hold 40 rallies across the U.S. and so on, all right? Here's how the IRA is set up. Just like our State Department is set up with foreign desks and so forth, their desk is set up inside Russia with a Department of Provocations to spread fake news, a foreign desk to spread anti-American stuff, a Facebook desk. That's how important Facebook is to them. They have a Facebook desk to push out propaganda, and then, of course, they have their own Russian desk to put out stuff inside Russia.
Welcome to our inquiry into disinformation and fake news. I'd like to welcome Christopher Wiley and Paul Olivier Tahay to the committee to give evidence this morning.
Have you or anybody else made any assessment of actually whether any of this made much difference to the final outcome of the EU referendum?
When you're caught in the Olympics doping, right, there's not a debate about how much illegal drug you took, right? Or, well, he probably would have come in first anyway, or, you know, he only took half of the amount, or doesn't matter. If you're caught cheating, you lose your medal, right? Because if we allow cheating in our democratic process, what about next time? What about the time after that, right? You shouldn't win by cheating.
So, we've heard about the Russians helping Trump. I want you to watch this video.
I looked at politically oriented searches that these people were conducting on Google, Bing, and Yahoo. I was able to preserve more than 13,000 searches and 98,000 web pages, and I found very dramatic bias in Google search results, not Bing or Yahoo, just Google's, favoring Hillary Clinton, whom I supported strongly. That level of bias was sufficient, I calculated, to have shifted over time somewhere between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes to Hillary without anyone knowing that this had occurred.
How is that manifested?
Well, if you go onto Google and you type in anything that's election related, and that could be hundreds of things, the point is you end up with some search suggestions that are flashed at you as you're typing. We now know that those search suggestions have a very, very powerful effect, and that they alone can shift opinions and votes dramatically. And then search results appear below, and the point is, if there's a bias in them, which means if a search result that's high up on the list, if that takes you to a web page that makes one candidate look better than another, well, if you're undecided, that information posted high in Google search results will shift opinions among undecided people dramatically, because people trust Google, and they especially trust high-ranking search results. That's why 50% of all clicks go to the top 2 items.
What I'm saying is that I believe in democracy, I believe in the free and fair election,
more than I have any kind of allegiance to a candidate or a party. Well, sure. If on Election Day in 2016, if Mark Zuckerberg, for example, had chosen to send out a go vote reminder, say just to Democrats, and no one would have known if he had done this, that would have given that day an additional at least 450,000 votes to Democrats. And we know this without doubt because of Facebook's own published data, because they did an experiment that they didn't tell anyone about during the 2010 election. They published it in 2012. It had 60 million Facebook users involved. They sent out a go vote reminder, and they got something like 360,000 more people to get off their sofas and go vote who otherwise would have stayed home. The point is, I don't think that Mr. Zuckerberg sent out that reminder in 2016. I think he was overconfident. I think Google was overconfident. All these companies were. I don't think he sent that out. Without monitoring systems in place, we'll never know what these companies are doing. But the point is, in 2018, I'm sure they were more aggressive. We have lots of data to support that. And in 2020, you can bet that all of these companies are going to go all out. And the methods that they're using are invisible. They're subliminal. They're more powerful than most any effects I've ever seen in the behavioral sciences. And I've been in the behavioral sciences for almost 40 years. In 2020, if all these companies are supporting the same candidate, there are 15 million votes on the line that can be shifted without people's knowledge and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
Is that pretty powerful stuff or what? Google can take a 50-50 split, somebody who truly is independent, doesn't know who they're going to vote for, and they can change it to a 90-10 split with no one knowing that they've been manipulated. Folks, it's not just foreign actors, it's domestic actors. We just need to all be aware that that's what's going on in our election system in today's world. Folks, it's happening right now, all right? Bernie Sanders, okay, now I'm looking at you young people, you guys in college. We need your help to solve this thing, all right? Bernie Sanders has been briefed that he's being helped by the Russians. So it's not just Trump, it's also Bernie Sanders. And Russia's also still looking to help Trump. How do we stop that? We're not going to stop it. We simply need to be aware of it and how the tools, the methods by which they're delivering those rounds on target. What is the internet? Okay, what is social media? Is it akin to broadcast journalism? Is it print journalism? Is it a town square, which is freedom of speech? You can say anything and do whatever you want, all right? That's the challenge that this younger generation has to help us solve, all right? Because the rules and regulations, I can guarantee you, have not kept up, and I've got a situation going on right here in West Virginia with our elections as we speak that we're trying to get through Facebook to get some of this resolved. So who should regulate the internet? Is it the tech companies themselves? We've seen Zuckerberg called in front of Congress. Should it be them with their own standards and policies? Is it the U.S. government? You see all the different agencies here that might be involved. Or is it the states themselves? California's already passed a law very similar to the Russia GDP or the European GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and that is forcing Congress's hand. Are we going to have 50 different regulations across the United States, or are we going to have one? That's the challenge for today. I want you to quickly understand the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Misinformation, there's no intent to deceive. Disinformation, there is an intent to deceive. And the malinformation is simply you're using information with bad intent. So let's give you a quick example. Here's misinformation. When Notre Dame Cathedral burnt down, there were algorithms in place that compared it to 9/11, and they said it's a terrorist act. 6 hours later, a human being inserted themselves into the process, said there's no threat of attack or of a terrorist attack, so they took it down. It was just bad information, no intent to deceive, all right? Here's one that has just happened since the State of the Union address. Watch this video and you tell me which one of those three this is. Whoops. It's not playing. There's supposed to be a video attached to this.
Charles is one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen, the first black fighter pilots and he also happens to be Ian's great-grandfather. Tonight, we have a very special surprise. I am thrilled to inform you that your husband is back from deployment. He is here with us tonight, and we couldn't keep him waiting any longer. On Easter Sunday of 2008, Chris was out on patrol in Baghdad when his Bradley fighting vehicle was hit by a roadside bomb. That night, he made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. To Kelly and Gage, Chris will live in our hearts forever. He is looking down on you now. Thank you.
Okay, that was actually put out by some folks on the Trump campaign. Now, it's not false. Those things happened. They didn't happen in that order. She wasn't tearing it up after each one of those, but that's the way it's portrayed. Is that freedom of speech? Is that disinformation? Is it malinformation? Should that be permitted? Pelosi asked them to take it down, and they refused. And Facebook said, we're not taking it down. All right. Twitter has one standard. Facebook has another. Should it be common throughout? Again, I'm looking at you young people. I need your all's input on this, all right? Right now, Bloomberg has been shut down by Twitter because he was using 70 young people like you, each of them pushing stuff out to make it look like he had this widespread support, but now Twitter got onto him and they made him shut it down, all right? He had this appearance of an online following, but it violated rules against Twitter's platform and so forth. You can't artificially amplify conversations and so forth through multiple accounts. It's going on as we speak in this presidential election. The Joker attack, similar sort of thing going on right now, being reported where, if you heard Bernie Sanders' comments about Castro, well, Bloomberg put out some stuff where he had similar comments about 6 other despots or dictators. Well, that didn't happen, but they started the tweet with this as a joke, and then they went ahead and did it. But people would pick and select their own versions of that and send it out, and it confused a lot of people as to whether Sanders had actually said that or not. Should that be permitted or not? Deepfakes, I suspect you young folks have seen this, but...
Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive.
I don't know about you, but if I saw that one video, I would think it was Barack Obama, but you can clearly see that it wasn't. That's the world that we're living in. That's why you can't trust anything. It used to be believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you see. In today's world, you can't believe anything that you see either with the deep fakes going on. Information warfare. It's harnessing the power of social media to sow confusion and to create fear-mongering. The good news, folks, I've been giving you a lot of bad news. There is good news. We've identified. We know where this is coming from. This is the headquarters for the IRA in St. Petersburg, Russia, all right? We know who's doing it. We now have a cyber command. We now have an administration that's getting it, understands what's going on. In 2018, we actually jammed this building for 2 days, the election day and the day after, so they couldn't put out false information to create the distrust in American elections. So we have a very competent capability. It's just to decide whether we decide to use it or not. We've now worked it into our national security strategy. We've gone from active defense to airline battle to full spectrum of operations to today it's multi-domain operations with cyber listed right at the top. All right, we understand that that's a form of warfare just like air, land, sea, space, and so on.
Is the Guardian stand on this a purely politically partisan one in its own intention to assist in any way that it can to reverse and overturn the result of the referendum?
This is not a partisan issue. I cannot say that more strongly. This is about the integrity of our democracy. It's about our national sovereignty. and I would think that you would have an interest in that also. I think that we desperately need more information because we don't know how people were targeted and we don't know what data that was based upon. One thing we do know is that Facebook has been obstructive in its efforts to help the British Parliament investigate this matter.
So, the U.S. named elections critical infrastructure to thwart Russian and other bad actors from their distractive, aggressive activity and to stop us from killing ourselves from within. What can you do? These items right here, all right? Just like we have learned, trust DHS, trust CISA, that's a cyber component of DHS. They've got some good information out there. Use it if you can get it, all right? I want to switch real quickly now from the Russian meddling to what's going on right here in West Virginia. There's quite a bit of interest over us where we led the nation 2 years ago in allowing soldiers and citizens overseas to vote using a mobile device, first time in the United States history, where people were able to vote in a federal election using a mobile device. We've now extended that to voters with disabilities. The governor signed legislation just a week or so ago, and we're going to allow this same technology to be used to get people with disabilities an electronic delivery of the ballot and an electronic marking device to mark that ballot. And if they so choose, they can now send it back using electronics, or they can print it off and mail it in. And I'm going to show you 4 quick reasons why we went this direction. A little self-bragging and for the grandparents in the audience here. My son's toughest day in Afghanistan was election day. He found 5 IEDs, 5 that the Taliban had planted around a polling place to prevent people from voting. There's my daughter in Alaska. There's another daughter on route clearance in Afghanistan. And here's a son as well. All 4 of them have had trouble voting. And if they've had trouble voting, I know the soldiers out everywhere else have had trouble voting, as I've had trouble voting as well. That's why it's willing to me to do a risk-reward analysis. The reward is huge. These folks now can vote using a mobile device, even if they don't have access to a printer or to the U.S. mail and so forth. Here they are just a little bit more cleaned up. So people talk about paper ballots being the gold standard. Folks, I have an example right here. I'll show you real quickly that it is not necessarily the gold standard because you get overvotes, undervotes, hesitation marks when you vote using a paper ballot. Here are actual overvotes from an election where 345,000 ballots were cast. Somebody else got to decide whether these votes counted or not. What was the intent? Here are undervotes. None of these votes counted because they circled both yes and no. What was their intent? Or hesitation marks, partially filled. Who gets to decide whether those votes count or not? So a paper ballot is not the solution. So when you start comparing, or people start comparing whether somebody might be able to hack into this versus hacking into a ballot, a UC grad just did a quick report for me today talking about the problems in California where somebody has and I'm looking at her right over here in the front row if you don't know who I'm talking about. Elaine Tuckweiler has been a fantastic asset to our office, by the way. And when she did so well on this assignment, I gave her another one. But here are the problems with paper ballots. And so I would say that the chance of somebody actually hacking into a soldier's phone, being in the proximity of a hillside in Afghanistan to try to change one vote, when they could be out sending memes to try to get an entire demographic not to participate in elections, it's worth that risk to me to give the reward to give those people a chance to vote. Another project that she did for me, boy, I'm bragging on UC a lot tonight, right here. Folks, this has become the national standard. This has been sent to every elections director, every Secretary of State throughout the United States. This was developed by Elaine Tuckweiler right here. And what it is, on July 22nd, 2014, a suicide bomber attacked the Camp Gibson, the place that I was at in Kabul, Afghanistan, killing 6 of our guards and wounding 12 others. In that pandemonium that ensued for the next hour or so, the first thing we did was got back to the headquarters and pulled out our continuing operations plan. And it told us step by step what to do when there's an attack that occurs, the notifications need to take place, the transporting of bodies to the morgue, the identification of next of kin, and so forth. It resonated with me at the time of greatest need. It's nice to have something to turn to. Well, she has done that now in the election world. No matter what happens, it could be a bomb, it could be a fire, it could be a cyber attack, it could be whatever you want, hazardous material. You simply turn to that tab and it tells you who to call here in West Virginia. And it's also county specific. We're going to make it so each county has this. This is going to be, we're going to have 1,723 of these printed. So every precinct in West Virginia is going to have a continuing operations plan. Folks, it may seem like an awful lot of work. Just last week, we had a bomb threat at an election place in Lewisburg. So it would have been nice to, I'm sure they would have liked to have had something like this at that moment. With that, don't take democracy for granted. Here are some of those attorneys I worked with in Afghanistan holding up the purple finger. That means they voted. They dipped their form of voter identification as voting, putting that finger in purple ink. They hold it up proudly, especially the women. But don't take your voting for granted. If the Taliban sees that purple ink on your finger, they cut your finger off. So don't take it for granted. That's another situation. All right, with that, folks, we have a few minutes for questions and answers. I'd be glad to address anything that I've covered this evening or something outside of the realm if you want to ask in that direction. So who's got my first question?
Okay. So you say there's not actually a way to completely remedy the issue, but is there any way that we can take steps towards it where that actually could become possible in the near future?
Well, we have started taking those steps, as I mentioned, with the National Guard's asset with the top secret security clearance. He's watching it every day. He's watching when the attacks occur. And on 4 or 5 occasions, he's come to me with an actual concern, saying, I'm seeing irregular activity, and we need to make a decision to shut the voter registration system down or whatever. The best thing is simply, one, for the elections in general, is to get out and talk to everybody so everyone's aware of what the Russians are up to. So the other is to, I use the word inoculate. We need to tell people ahead of time that this is what the Russians are up to. So on election day, when they say Hillary Clinton wins, when the polls are showing, or the polls are all showing Hillary Clinton wins, and they say Hillary Clinton wins, but in reality the votes are coming in for Trump, understand that, and I'm getting the word out. The press is geared for speed. We're geared for accuracy. Get your information from the folks who are accurate. We still have absentee ballots that may come in. We have contested ballots, that sort of thing. You might have those, if somebody was using paper ballots, those kinds of marks we have to go through and sort out which votes count and so forth. So it's more just informing people ahead of time that these are the tactics being used. Other questions?
So it's a little bit harder to deal with, foreign issues like Russia. What do you think needs done regarding like domestic issues like Facebook and Twitter and social media? What do you think would be the best solution at targeting that?
Have folks like you smart guys, get involved in this arena. That's why I'm so thrilled to see so many of you involved in this arena. I love having Elaine over in the office, people who have grown up with this in their, the social media as part of their life. My kids will tell me, hey, Dad, I can tell when there's a fake video or not. I don't know how accurate that is, but they seem to have a better knack for that than I do. So we need people involved in the process. And so I love to see Epstein's study of what Google is doing. I think we need to expose that. That needs to get out. But it's only going to be done if people research it and put out legitimate research papers. Right now, we are under attack from MIT. MIT has said that the app that we used in the 2018 election is not secure. But what they did is they used a version that was 27 versions old. It's like using Windows 7 versus Windows 10. They used their own sandbox. They basically built it. Well, if you built the app that you're attacking, I would hope that you would be able to get inside of it. They weren't able to actually use the source of the proprietary protocols and so forth. You're not going to give the bank architect drawings to the robber. You're going to keep those. You're going to keep those secrets. So they didn't actually attack or get inside the actual app that was used. So, in fact, when somebody did try to do it, we picked it up. We've turned it over to the FBI for investigation and so forth. So it's what I want. In fact, I was talking to Elaine this morning about it, is doing an article comparing, not is this perfect, no system is perfect, but comparing the electronic delivery of the ballot compared to an absentee ballot that in California, there were examples that were just in the paper this last day or so, where a husband whose wife had died, he gets 2 ballots. He gets her ballot as well. Well, could he vote it, sign her signature, and send it back in? Who would ever know? Somebody changed parties. He got the ballot for the old party, got a ballot for the new party. So there are problems with that. So I think there are going to be just as many problems with a paper delivery as you are with an electronic delivery. I need research done to show that. That's what I need, though. Other questions? Please.
In regards to the concerns with misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Once you are able to identify, like, I understand that you appreciate young people being present and our ability to navigate a digital space with proficiency and everything. But once that sort of or I guess more malinformation with, actual intent to cause harm is identified, what would your preferred ideal route of action be towards that, like in regards to free speech and stuff? And stuff is a great way to end that, I'm sure, but.
As you started to ask that question, I'm thinking to a specific example that's ongoing, and when our laws need to stay current with the technology, and they haven't. Now, this law that allows the disabled voters to get it, I think we are staying current. In fact, we're staying ahead of the curve. All right, this could be the first in the nation. If a voter with a disability votes and actually sends their ballot back electronically, it will be the first time in the nation that that's happening. It'll be right here in West Virginia. So that's kind of neat. But the malinformation situation is so hard to determine. Is it free speech? Is it malintent? Was it a joke? I mean, we're seeing all that play out right now. So my answer is, as a former prosecutor and defense counsel and so forth, is we've got to take these situations and make case studies out there, cases and controversies. In the law, you always look for, when I say Roe versus Wade, you know what I'm talking about. If I say Brown versus Board of Education, he knows what I'm talking about. All right, we need those cases and controversies to decide, was this malintent sufficiently enough that it violated election laws to the point where it inhibited somebody from voting, it discouraged somebody from voting, it encouraged somebody to vote that wasn't able to, that sort of thing. And so it's challenging for a lawyer just to think up these things out of clear blue. It's when something happens in the space, now we need to pin that tail on the donkey and say, did that violate law or not? And if it didn't, we need to rewrite. If it is sufficient enough, and I think we've got a situation going on right now where it is, we now need to make that a case in controversy, take it to the courts and see if we can get a jury to convict. And if so, we've now set new precedent. So it's, some of you are interested in law school and so forth. We need somebody in that cyber arena with legal degrees to push it just like they did Brown versus Board of Education, Civil Rights Act, and all that sort of thing as well. We need that happening in the election space. I hope that answered your question. Other questions? Anybody?
Actually, another question. You mentioned how you're trying to get the election to be more under the control of the federal government, but would it not become an issue whenever the federal government has continued discontinuity within the leadership of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me first address, I do not want the federal government taking over. What's happened is the federal government is actually, the phrase, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help, they're actually doing that. They are not trying to take it over. We were afraid they were, but now with both administrations, they are providing us resources, assets, training. You can go into any courthouse now in West Virginia, and you should see up on the wall a poster that was distributed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for that specific county, telling them it's basically that COOP that I mentioned, the Continuing Operations Plan, but on in a chart form. They got that out before we were able to get this Continuing Operations Plan. So the federal government is providing resources. They provided us about $3 million in HAVA 2 money, Help America Vote Act money. They're now providing us $4 million that will be used this year to help secure, and what Chuck and our team has done is leverage that. So it's a 50-50 match. So we're taking that $4 million and actually with the counties and the state money, making it $8 million worth of buying new voter equipment and so forth. So I applaud the federal government for what it's doing in providing assistance and not trying to take it over and tell us how to run our elections. I'm glad you asked that. I think we're just about out of time. If I have one more question, I'd be glad to entertain it. Seeing none, I will thank you all for inviting me over here. This has been wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Hopefully I'll be invited back at some future point. And please keep sending us great people that you've been training, because they're providing wonders, as you've seen just in this evening, how much of a resource the University of Charleston has been to our office. Thank you.